And we are going to turn our attention to an update regarding the diversity, equity, and inclusion framework that the board affirmed at our last quarterly meeting. We all know that DEI efforts are not new to our universities or to our system. In fact, our universities have been working hard for years to make our campuses more inclusive and diverse for students, faculty, and staff. There's a lot of work that remains, I think what we're doing now is putting a particular focus on it from the point of view at the board level. We, by doing that and by putting together, having Denise Pearson as our Vice Chancellor and Chief DEI Officer, working with her and her hard work to put together a system-wide DEI framework, we really can leverage the power of being a system in order to advance these initiatives much farther and much faster. And again, I will just add, because it's the theme of the day, this is system redesign as well. And another very important way that we can do so much better to leverage our resources and our strengths as a system. So let me now ask Dr. Denise Pearson for an update on those efforts.
Absolutely.
Denise?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Chairwoman Shapiro, for giving me this time to share some updates on DEI efforts across PASSHE. You know, as some of you may remember, August 5th will mark 1 year since I joined the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion as their inaugural Vice Chancellor. And it continues to be a privilege to engage in this work. And I am so encouraged by what we've been able to accomplish since I joined here almost a year ago. But I'm also encouraged by what appears to be a steady pace, you know, that we're on to continuing moving this important work forward. For that, I want to say a simple, but nonetheless sincere thanks to everyone for your role. Those, however small, however big, however visible, however invisible, we would not be where we are if it were not for our collective efforts. So thank you for that. What I'm going to do now is share some of the progress that we've made since the last board meeting, as Chairwoman Shapiro said, when we affirmed a set of strategic priorities for the state system. So Randy, I'm ready for the next slide. So as a quick reminder, the framework represents a collaborative effort that resulted in the identification of 5 strategic priorities as listed here. As a group, we came together and we said in the immediate future, we need to focus on faculty, staff, and student diversity, equitable student outcomes, building inclusive communities, curriculum diversity, and building and maintaining and enabling infrastructure. We also included some very mission-driven, outcomes-focused, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound initiatives that align with these priorities. Following the last board meeting, comprised of the ELG, which, as you know, is comprised of presidents and the chancellor, we finalized a series of charges, which are also outlined in the framework, that align with these strategic priorities. They were then disseminated to senior university leadership for execution. We've since received feedback about these charges, which will inform our work going forward. And the first joint meeting of these system leadership group leads and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion will take place next Monday. And I'm really excited about breathing some life into this plan that we've worked really hard on. And again, represents a collective commitment to creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive system of higher education for all of our stakeholder groups. I'm ready for the next slide, Randy. So the first goal of increasing faculty, staff, and student diversity will initially focus largely on representation or compositional diversity, for which, as Chairwoman Shapiro said, several universities have already established practices in place that we will, as a group, examine as part of our efforts to recommend a coordinated and comprehensive strategy to the ELG. And to do this work, there are a lot of people involved, but the chief academic officers and the chief diversity officers will lead this work on their respective campuses. But the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, as well as the Office of Advanced Data Analytics, we are here to ensure that they have data and other relevant information available to inform our decisions and ultimately inform whatever recommendations we bring forward to the ELG later on this year, hopefully before the end of the year. I'm ready for the next slide, Randy. The second priority, which is equitable student outcomes, the main goal here is to eliminate attainment gaps, and we will initially focus on student performance and leveraging existing university policies and practices that close performance gaps such as graduation rates, second-year persistent rates, and credit accumulation. In addition to examining other evidence-based research and best practices that have shown to be effective, not just at the local level, but nationally as well. Chief Student Affairs officers are leading this charge on their respective campuses. And again, the Offices of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Advanced Data Analytics, we will be here to support their work and make sure that they have the data that they need and any additional information to inform their work going forward. But again, the goal here is to stay focused on student achievement and make sure not just that we're closing attainment gaps for historically excluded groups who did not necessarily have the same opportunities as other students may have had, but to improve outcomes for all students that receive those coveted letters of admission from our passion universities. I'm ready for the next slide, Randy. The third goal is to build inclusive communities, and the goal here will initially focus on assessing current policies and practices as our overall effort to develop a coordinated and comprehensive strategy. This work will include the administration of a system-wide climate survey for the first time. We will be administering it to faculty, staff, and students, and the data will be disaggregated by universities, and university presidents will be able to use that data, have conversations with their leadership on their campuses to decide what they need to do, where they need to stay the course, change the course to make sure that they are developing and maintaining campus climates where faculty, staff, and students can thrive. It's important, to emphasize that, yes, we are largely concerned about student outcomes as we should be, but the conditions under which faculty and staff engage with our universities are important as well. No, I think I still have, and then with regard to inclusive communities, I also want to bring your attention to the establishment of a working group that examines the intersection of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the First Amendment to improve campus climates. This group was launched last month, and actionable items will be forthcoming before the end of the year. This is another exciting initiative, I believe. The group is comprised, it's chaired by one of our presidents, President Long. The group membership also includes students, faculty, staff. We have chiefs of police. We have people from human resources. We have chief diversity officers. So, we're all coming, and then it's also staffed by the Office of Legal Affairs and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And we have 6 meetings, I believe, already set up. And we are going to we have already started. We're bringing in external subject matter experts from the areas of free speech, Office of Civil Rights, the Commission on human relations, and they're going to come and they're going to make presentations to the group, and we will then break off and have conversations with ourselves as the PASHA community and discuss what we've heard, and ask questions if we have a need for additional information. And when we are done, we will be able to make some recommendations to the ELG, again, for them to apply to their campus environments. But again, the importance is, to have a better understanding of, what we can do to ensure that all students are experiencing our campus climates in a safe and welcoming way without breaking any laws. So excited about that. And then the last thing, mandatory DEI training is ongoing. You may recall that it's a series of 3 modules where we look at the topics such of microaggressions, the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion in modern workplace, as well as accommodating disabilities. So this work continues. We're excited about it, and we're not going to let up until we are confident, looking at the data, that students coming to our campus, regardless of how they may identify or for whatever zip code they may have come from, they feel welcome, they feel valued, and they feel affirmed. So feeling good about that. I'm ready, Randy.
There's a hand up, Senator Martin.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. A question. So in terms of implementation, and I know, everything we do has to take in consideration with the same things that we're working on in terms of budgetary impact. If I recall, this was about $9 or $10 million effort in terms of implementation. Where's that money coming from, if I may ask?
Yeah, and if it's okay, can we let Chancellor Greenstein answer that question? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When you say where is the money coming from?
Yes.
I think Dan has a presentation prepared for that. Can we hold off until then?
Yeah, that would be my Senator Martin. We will be presenting the budget tomorrow. The presentation comes in 3 sections, actually 2 sections. One has to do with the allocation of state funds, which are appropriated every year, and the other with the use of the $50 million one-time funding that we got committed by the General Assembly, plus the $25 million in funds that are thrown off as a result of this year, as a result of our prepayment of the our obligation to SERS. So the diversity, equity, inclusion work will be included in that presentation. So if you're okay, I'm going to suggest we save it for tomorrow. Is that possible?
Yeah, okay. As long as they'll have a conversation about it. Yep.
Absolutely. And then you can see the work in the context of see the work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and how it sort of relates to other objectives that we're pursuing using one-time funding.
Thank you. I appreciate the question nonetheless. Thank you so much. Next one. So curriculum diversity. The goal here is to initially focus on existing university strategies, research, and best practices to inform a recommendation to the ELG that leads to creating a curriculum that reflects human, societal, and human diversity. As you may recall from previous conversations I've had with this group, students are saying to us, we don't see ourselves reflected in the curriculum. We don't see, or we're not experiencing our classrooms, in a way that affirm, our identities. And there is a consensus amongst faculty, and I'm so glad that, I've had the opportunity to work with Jamie Phillips, who is the chair of the faculty council. But this is something where there appears to be a lot of momentum. Faculty want to offer students the diverse curriculum that they so rightfully deserve. And to that end, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, I have partnered with Faculty Council, specifically Jamie Phillips, to co-construct a readiness survey for future consideration in our efforts to achieve curriculum diversity. And it's really just it's a very brief survey to get a better understanding of where faculty are and where they want to be and what assistance they need to move this work forward. And so, Jamie, you know, a shout out and a big thank you, you know, to you for just always embracing the opportunity to have a conversation with me and, you know, to move the agenda forward. I really appreciate your leadership, and I value, you know, your collegiality and look forward to, you know, moving the needle in this real important area. Next slide. So the fifth and final area of the priority is ensuring that we have the resources, incentives, strategies, and accountabilities in place to support progress. And each one of these areas, it transcends each one of the aforementioned goals. So, you know, we're not going to be able to get to Senator Martin's comment. We're not going to be able to move the needle on curriculum diversity, inclusive communities, faculty, staff, and student diversity, or anything else unless we have the infrastructures in place to support that work, and that includes financial support. We've made some progress in this front, including the launching of a system-wide committee to review board policies. We've brought in some external consultants to do some very preliminary training for us specifically. We brought in folks from the Minnesota state system. They really have done considerable work in this area, and also a colleague from the University of Pittsburgh. We've added a board member to the DEI Board of Advisors to further advise the work in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And if I may thank you, Governor Skinner, for accepting the invitation and for your willingness to serve. I heard you speak earlier about all the time that you have put into your passion responsibilities, and I am humbled that you saw fit to find additional time to support this specific work on the diversity, equity, and inclusion front. Let's see. We recently held, I'm still on this one, we recently held the first time retreat for chief diversity officers across the system. First, I want to say that this is a phenomenal group of professionals, leaders, that are really leading the DEI charge on their campus. This was the first time I had ever met them in person, and we spent 2 days together looking at the charges, talking about what they're doing on their campuses, learning from one another before we come into a meeting of all senior system leadership groups. I think it's on Monday. But I want to just pause for a moment and really sing their praises. These are some hard-working folks there. They have taught me things that I didn't know about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm, again, another group of folks that I'm just honored to work with. So during our meeting, one of the things we talked about were the 6 charges, or not the 6 charges, the charges that show up for each one of the strategic priorities. And we really engaged in some deep conversations about what next steps should look like. And we will have a report that the representatives from the Chief Diversity, I think there are 3 of them that will be at the first meeting, the joint meeting of SLGs. They will bring that collective thinking together and link arms with chief academic officers, chief student affairs officers, information technology folks, as well as, financial officers. And that's, again, how we are going to, breathe life as a collective into this plan and, be good stewards of whatever resources, we are fortunate enough to have bear on the work that we're doing. So really, excited about that. Couple other things. I'm excited about the partnership that we're starting with Loyola University that focuses on the role of governing boards in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, I always say leadership matters. And the fact that, you know, Chairwoman Shapira, actually was her idea for us to explore how this might look. And we're going to be a pioneering system, if you will, you know, we will be. You know, we will be working with other systems of higher education to look at how we can best leverage the board in moving the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. And then finally, going back to Senator Martin's question, we are on a path to ensure adequate resources are identified to support all of the important work that's happening on our campuses. And I look forward to, you know, Chancellor Greenstein's presentation.